Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Connect New Mexico Broadband Funding Webinar. My name is John Salazar, and I am the Secretary of the New Mexico Department of Information Technology. We are honored today to host this very important webinar with Senator Tom Udall and his staff, who have worked diligently over the years to support state efforts to improve broadband conditions throughout New Mexico. We also look forward to hearing from U.S. Representative Torres Small later in the webinar on the federal broadband infrastructure funding she has helped secure via House legislation just last week. The main focus of our webinar today is to update our New Mexico's broadband stakeholders and partners on critical federal broadband funding opportunities that currently exist or are emerging. Obviously, we all understand broadband is a lifeline and a staple for basic quality of life in today's world, especially during the COVID pandemic. And broadband is also, no doubt, a requirement for economic development, public health, safety, and other critical needs. As one of the most rural states in the nation, I encourage all eligible stakeholders to look forward for ways to collaborate with one another and to leverage federal funding opportunities as much as possible in order to bring internet connectivity to populated and underserved rural areas of the state. The Department of Information Technology, our Office of Broadband, has recently completed a statewide rural broadband assessment in order to comprehensively advance our New Mexico broadband strategic plan, which was last updated in 2014. The current assessment was done utilizing new data sets of greater value and advanced techniques for broadband analysis. We believe the report is an accurate representation of the current rural broadband conditions statewide. Even though the state has succeeded with major broadband initiatives in years past, there is still a lot of work to be done. According to the plan, we have between 196,000 and 120,000 residents and business locations that are currently underserved for broadband facilities. According to the plan, there's a $2 billion to $5 billion gap needed to, or funding needed to fulfill the gap. Our broadband manager here, Kendra Karp, to my left, is going to give us more information related to the assessment. And our GIO, Gar Clark, is going to be providing some information on mapping and some of the analysis that was done in the assessment. At this time, I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce our next speaker, Senator Udall, who has done a remarkable job supporting our state across all sectors on a national level for nearly 2 decades now. When I look at the work Senator Udall has done on behalf of our state, a term comes to mind: we stand on the shoulders of giants. This term sums up my feelings for the legacy Senator Udall leaves behind. He has cleared the path and he has elevated our great state to a more prominent position. We are very grateful for his efforts, and he leaves us in a much better position. Thank you, Senator, on behalf of our citizens, of our governor, and for our department. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary Salazar, for that very, very generous introduction. The State Department of Information Technology is fortunate to have you at the helm with so many years of experience. And good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be teaming up with Representative Torres Small, who you'll hear from later, and do it facing our state, closing the digital divide. This pandemic has made it abundantly clear that universal access to broadband is an absolute imperative. To comply with public health orders and stay safe, we need broadband to work, go to school, get health care, access social services. These are not luxuries, these are necessities. Yet so many across our state and the country don't have broadband access. And who's getting hit hardest? Communities of color, disadvantaged communities, rural communities. New Mexico ranks 49th in the nation in broadband access. We have counties like Hidalgo and Xochitl with less than 10% coverage. Colfax and Catron that have less than 15%. In a state with a population of about 2 million, we have over 340,000 residents who don't have the broadband access they need. New Mexico tribes are behind. Tribal areas around the nation have far less access to broadband than the rest of America. The FCC estimates 35% lack adequate broadband compared to 8% nationally. We must, once and for all, close the divide. Since the onset of this pandemic, Congress has taken some action to expand broadband. The CARES Act authorized funding for telehealth through the Federal Communication Commission's COVID-19 Telehealth grant. In May, the Navajo Nation received a grant of almost $1 million for home health care and remote monitoring services for patients who are isolated and under shelter-in-place orders. This funding will help low-income, elderly, vulnerable, and high-risk patients and is vital to a tribe that is experiencing one of the worst outbreaks in the nation. The CARES Act also increased funding for the Reconnect pilot program. Last month, New Mexico was awarded $23 million in rural broadband grants under Reconnect. As a result, more than 2,200 households in Acapulco Pueblo and eastern New Mexico will get connected. Another funding opportunity coming down the pipe is the FCC's Rural Digital Opportunities Fund auction. That's a $20 billion program to expand broadband in unserved rural and low-income areas. I held a webinar with the FCC just a few weeks ago on the auction, and some of you attended that. I'd really like to see New Mexico take full advantage of that program, although I'm concerned that we're putting the cart before the horse, because as many of you know, the FCC's broadband availability maps aren't accurate. In March, Congress did pass the Broadband Data Act and will improve the accuracy of the FCC's broadband availability maps, which is a step forward. Accurate maps are critical for the FCC and Congress to invest in infrastructure where it's most needed. Working together, we've made gains, but we have a lot of work ahead of us. During this pandemic, when schools are closed and the only way the kids can learn is online, making sure all students are connected is imperative. That's why I joined many other Senate Democrats to introduce the Emergency Educational Connections Act. This bill makes sure that all K through 12 students are connected and have devices. The bill would provide $4 billion in needed funding for schools and libraries, including tribal schools and libraries, with Wi-Fi hotspots, modems, routers, and other internet-connected devices through the E-rate program. It would require schools and libraries to prioritize resources for students who lack internet access, providing flexibility in the E-rate program to fund hotspots and mobile campuses has been a priority of mine even before this crisis, but especially now. During this time when remote learning is essential, we simply can't allow our kids, many of whom are already disadvantaged, to fall behind. And we can't continue to leave Native American communities behind. Just 46.6% of housing units on rural tribal lands have access to fixed broadband service, a nearly 27 percent point gap compared to non-tribal rural areas. This is absolutely unacceptable. I recently introduced the Bridging the Tribal Digital Divide Act to speed up deployment of broadband services in Native communities and eliminate bureaucratic barriers. We need to connect tribal communities, not only because it's the right thing to do, but to make sure we're upholding the federal government's trust and treaty responsibilities to Native communities. Finally, I will close with a call to expand the subsidy available through Lifeline. Lifeline makes communication services more affordable to low-income consumers by giving subscribers a discount on monthly telephone or broadband service. The FCC has temporarily prohibited current Lifeline subscribers from being involuntarily removed from the program during the COVID pandemic. But the FCC has not done enough to help Americans facing economic challenges during this crisis to get or stay connected. The Commission needs to expand the subsidy available through Lifeline, improve services, and do more to advertise the availability of Lifeline to newly eligible homes. If there is a time to commit to closing the digital divide, it is now. Our dependence on broadband has grown exponentially during this pandemic, and it's not going to abate. We have no time to waste. And now I'll turn it over to Kendra Karp, Director of the Broadband Office at DoIT, who will moderate today's webinar.
Thank you, Senator Udall. We really appreciate everything that you do for the state of New Mexico. Well, I know we have a packed agenda today, so I think we'll go ahead and start with our next speaker, who is Chris Rice from the Federal Economic Development Administration, the EDA, and he is here to help educate us on the CARES Act Recovery Assistance Program offerings. Chris?
Great. Thank you, Kendra, and thank you to Secretary Salazar, Senator Udall, and Representative Torres Small for having us here today and allowing EDA to showcase our programs. So through the CARES Act, EDA received $1.5 billion in funds for projects that prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus, including for necessary expenses for responding to economic injury as a result of coronavirus. So EDA, as a department or an agency under the Department of Commerce, it leads the federal economic agenda. So we do a number of different types of projects. Broadband is one tool that we have to foster economic development, but is one that obviously is a growing need, and we're looking to do more, particularly in the area of rural broadband. So our Austin Regional Office covers 5 states, including New Mexico, and out of that $1.5 billion in funding, we received $236 million through our Economic Adjustment Program. So Economic Adjustment is one of our programs that allows us to deploy a diverse set of strategies and projects to be able to deal with critical economic challenges in the region. And obviously, in this case, it's responding to the pandemic. So, I'd like to kind of first highlight, eligible applicants, because I think that will help establish, where EDA fits into the funding landscape here. So unlike some of the other funders, one segment that we don't work directly with is the private sector. So our eligible applicants are states, political subdivisions of states, so counties and cities, towns, our councils of governments, our district organizations, tribes, institutions of higher education, or nonprofits that work in coordination with political subdivisions. So, I would encourage you all to review our site and make sure you're an eligible applicant if you're interested in funding. And we'll talk a little bit about, what types of projects we fund in a moment. Just so you're aware, we do have a matching requirement for the CARES Act funding. Given the nature of the emergency, EDA generally intends to fund 80% of the project cost, which would mean that applicants would need to come up with 20% of the total project cost. In the context of broadband, typically that's construction, so that would be a cash match usually. But in the case where there might be a need for planning grants, you could also get in kind, and we can provide you some ideas on how you might be able to come up with that match requirement. So, one thing I'd like to establish, this is through the CARES Act, projects should address the nexus with the pandemic, but also demonstrate that what is the economic impact of the project. We typically look at some aspects like how many jobs or private investment, how much private investment might be associated with it, but also how does this help a region to build its capacity for economic development and address these challenges. So just to finish up the general information, we have a rolling application process. It's open right now. We have to obligate all of our funds by no later than September 30th, 2022. So as we'll talk through, what successful projects look like, start thinking now if you've got something. I know the demand is going to be huge, and we're already starting to get applications in. So I'd encourage you to reach out to us, and we'll help you move as quickly as we can through that. So just to give you a sense of what EDA does and examples of some past broadband projects that we've done, we're able to help in a few different ways. So one of the most direct ways, and what most of you might be looking for, is through infrastructure. So for example, I highlighted a project from our Philadelphia regional office recently where they did installation of fiber optic cable over a multi-county region. And the idea is, where some other agencies look maybe more at the household impact, we're also looking at it from the aspect of how our business is connected. That's typically a challenge to growth, particularly in rural areas, is that connectivity. So we're looking at it from the economic side. What are the businesses that are being connected? So in this case, we were able to do an infrastructure project that helped to directly address that. A couple other ways that we've been able to in our region in the last couple of years. One is an engineering plan. We had a multi-county council of governments that had already sort of figured out what it wanted to accomplish, but they needed to develop engineering requirements and go out and find, what were the specific requirements they needed, what were the rights of way they might need to acquire, and they wanted to develop this future broadband network. So we were able to give them some funds to work on that piece. And then on a sort of more basic level, we do a lot of planning grants, and we had a multi-county region that was also just looking to figure out, what are our priority areas? Where do we even start? And what are the biggest gaps in our ecosystem? So we were able to give a planning grant to help them work with all the counties in their region and develop a list of pilot projects that they wanted to pursue going forward. So I know that infrastructure may be the key thing, but we will want to look at all those different aspects depending on what your needs are. So talking about what makes a competitive project, just to help you all if you're interested in pursuing EDA funding. First of all, I talked about that nexus between the economic impact of the pandemic and how does that goal actually, or how does the project actually address those challenges? There's the link between the pandemic, but also how does this help you move forward and become ready for a future event or future disasters? Communicating the economic outcomes of the project. So I mentioned a couple of the things that we look at: job creation, retention, private investment. But a lot of times there are other important factors that you need to consider in terms of making yourself prepared. I think right now, transitioning to a digital economy of the future is something that's going to be important. So that might not show up in those numbers, but is clearly an important regional priority. One other thing we like to point out early on: make sure that you have your details figured out to a sufficient degree, that you've got a budget that is sufficient and makes sense, that you've looked into environmental and engineering requirements, that you're not sort of getting ahead of the curve, because we will ask for all that sort of information. And then also with matching funds, make sure that you've secured those at the outset so that it doesn't cause you any issues when you apply. We have a great project, but the match isn't committed, and then we have to turn that down. So just making sure that you have all those pieces in place, and our staff can help you to work on that specifically, figuring out some of those details. So another important point, we fund our councils of government in each of our states to do this comprehensive economic development strategy. So we always want our projects to support the goals of that. So make sure that you're keeping in the loop your councils of government who we talk to on a regular basis, and they can also be a very important asset to you because they can help put together applications and give you guidance on how to make it competitive. We look for projects that have widespread support from regional stakeholders. So you probably noticed, when talking about some of the projects we've funded, that I'm talking a lot about multi-county areas. EDA focuses a lot on regional economic development rather than one town versus another town. So to the extent that you're able to establish that this is a regional goal, there's less risk because we have all of these stakeholders involved. We don't have any political opposition to it. Those types of things are very important to us to see that, once our investment is completed, that this is a project that the region is going to continue pursuing and implementing. And finally, on broadband projects, there are a number of things, and we can work with you on the specifics of it. But, I always like to have folks provide clarity on the ownership and operation arrangement. Generally, with any infrastructure projects, the applicant would need to own and operate or own and maintain in a network. And so I think there are arrangements where you could lease that out to the private sector, for example, if you're trying to find a provider to operate a network. But give us some information about how that would look. What is your financial sustainability plan? A lot of times with local governments, it may be a challenge to keep it operationally functioning. So just making sure we understand that you have a good plan in place. And evidence that it addresses connectivity. We don't want to duplicate the work that the private sector can do. So show us where that gap is and what the project will accomplish. So I'll just finish up my presentation by giving some information about applying for funding. So I have the link here on our funding information and notice. It's also on our website, eda.gov. As I mentioned, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to your local economic development district or council of governments for assistance. We have an economic development representative. I'll put her contact information on the next screen. She's based in Albuquerque. She can give you a lot of great feedback on how to prepare an application. And finally, just reiterating that we review them on a regular basis. And shortly after we are able to review them, we'll provide you some information on whether or not we intend to go forward so that you can either continue working on that or go another route. So if you have any questions, I'll just put here the information for Tricia Corbus. She's our economic development representative, again, based in Albuquerque. When we're able to travel again, she's usually happy to go out and talk to folks. So good luck, and please let us know if we can help in any way.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. That was a very good presentation. Very exciting opportunities there. Tricia is very good at her job. We know her very well. And I'm sure that if anyone in the audience has any questions, she's the right person to contact. So thank you, Chris. So moving on, our next speaker is Brian Boyle, and he is from the FCC. FCC. And he specializes in the rural healthcare program, but he has also offered to give us a quick update on the status of the COVID-19 telehealth program. So Brian?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and many thanks to the organizers for having me. I'm here to talk about the rural healthcare program. I'm the manager of the program in the FCC's Telecommunications Access Policy Division. And even if you may have never heard of rural healthcare program, you might be familiar with some of the other programs that our division manages the Lifeline program, the high cost program, and the E-rate program. So I'm going to talk about the rural healthcare program and then a bit on the COVID-19 telehealth program and the connected care pilot program, which hasn't launched yet, but which may be of interest to some folks. So just a general overview on the program. It arose from the 1996 Telecommunications Act, and there are actually two sub-programs within the Rural Healthcare Program. There is the Telecom program and the Healthcare Connect Fund program, and I will discuss some of the ins and outs of both of those. Like all of our other universal service programs, the Universal Service Administrative Company administers the program. There's a link to the rural healthcare page on USAC's website. That website has a wealth of resources for all of our universal service programs. So it's really a great one-stop shop if you have any questions about any of those programs. But the first question that usually comes into somebody's mind when they hear about a federal program is how much money is available. And for funding year 2020, $605 million is available for the rural health care program. That funding cap is indexed to inflation, so it adjusts every year with inflation. For funding year 2020, there's an additional $198 million in unused funds from previous years that's available. So the total amount that's available is $803 million for funding year 2020. The funding year runs from July 1st through June 30th. So funding year 2020 just started on July 1st. Applications for funding year 2020 were due on June 30th. So unfortunately, it is too late to apply for funding year 2020, but competitive bidding for funding year 2021 just began on July 1st. And that would be a great time for any carriers that might be interested in providing services for the program to go on USAC's website and see what requests for services might be out there. Second question usually that comes into somebody's mind when they hear about a federal program is who's eligible for support. And for the rural healthcare program, on the next slide, you see that there are three components for eligibility. First, an entity has to be one of 7 types of healthcare provider. They either have to be a post-secondary institution offering healthcare instruction, a community health center or healthcare center providing healthcare to migrants, a local health department or agency, a community mental health center, a not-for-profit hospital, a rural health clinic, a skilled nursing facility, or for the Healthcare Connect Fund program only, they could be a consortium that's made up of these eligibility types. So that's the first prong. The second prong is on the next slide, you'll see that an entity has to either be not-for-profit or public. It means that unfortunately for-profit organizations aren't eligible for funding for the rural healthcare program. And third, as you could probably guess from the name, an entity has to be rural. Rurality is based on whether the entity is located inside or outside a core-based statistical area as identified by the Census Bureau. And there is a small carve-out in the Healthcare Connect Fund program. Some non-rural applicants can be eligible to participate in a consortium so long as the consortium has majority rural health care providers. So now that we have that sort of baseline understanding of the program, I'm going to walk through just a couple of the differences between the Telecom program and the Healthcare Connect Fund program. The Telecom program provides support for telecommunication services based off of the difference between the urban rate in a state and the healthcare provider's rural rate that they actually pay. So essentially, this is designed to put healthcare providers that happen to be rural on the same footing as urban healthcare. The healthcare provider would pay what is determined to be the urban rate in their state. Because they're rural, what they ultimately pay for telecommunication services would generally be higher than the urban rate. So the amount of support is anything above and beyond that amount, carriers receive that difference between the urban and the rural rate. For the telecom program specifically, healthcare providers can only participate as individuals. They can't participate in consortium, and funding is based, funding commitments are made on a year-by-year basis, so there are no multi-year commitments in the telecom program. There has been a recent overhaul of how rates are calculated in the telecom program. In August of 2019, the Commission reformed the program overall to increase transparency, predictability, and efficiency because of limited funding. And on the next slide, there is a summary of how rates are determined now, or how they will begin to be determined in the telecom program. So starting in funding year 2021, rather than having healthcare providers and service providers go back and forth with the administrator, substantiate rates will be calculated using a publicly available database. Rural rates will be the median of all of the available rates for same or functionally similar services within a rurality tier within that state. The rurality tiers are less rural, rural, extremely rural, and frontier. Again, those are based off of census data. The urban rate will be calculated in a similar manner. It will be the median of all available rates for functionally similar services in the urbanized area of the state. That database is currently up. It launched on July 1st, so you can check it out for yourself on USAC's website. And again, the level of support for the telecom program would be the rural rate generated by the difference between the urban rate generated by the database and the rural rate generated by the database. So that is a very short primer on the telecom program, and now we'll shift over to the Healthcare Connect Fund program, which is slightly different than the telecom program, and I'll explain how. Rather than basing support on the difference between the urban and rural rates, the Healthcare Connect Fund program provides a flat 65% discount on eligible charges for broadband connectivity and broadband network. So the fund pays 65% of the service, and then the healthcare provider would pay for the other 35% of the cost of the service. In the Healthcare Connect Fund program, as I've mentioned, consortia applicants are permitted, and oftentimes larger consortium applications can take advantage of purchasing power because there are more entities that are purchasing a service from the carrier. One other important distinction between the HCF program and the telecom program is that the Healthcare Connect Fund program offers support for HCP-owned infrastructure, broadband services, and also equipment that is necessary for networks such as routers. Finally, connections to offsite administrative offices and data centers are eligible for support as well. And in the Healthcare Connect Fund program, there are multi-year funding commitments available. This was a very, very high level overview of the two rural health programs within the rural healthcare program. If you have any specific questions, I would be happy to answer them. Also, as I mentioned earlier, USAC's website is a fantastic resource for anybody that has questions about the programs or healthcare providers or carriers that might be interested in participating with the program. As I mentioned, there are two other relatively new programs that are run by the Federal Communications Commission that I wanted to touch on. The first is the COVID-19 Telehealth program, and that arose from the CARES Act. In the CARES Act, Congress appropriated $200 million to the FCC to support healthcare providers as they address coronavirus, to provide telecommunication services, information services, and devices necessary to enable the provision of telehealth. So shortly after the CARES Act was adopted, the FCC established the COVID-19 Telehealth program to provide funding for eligible healthcare providers dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. And the way it has worked is that applications have been submitted on a rolling basis, and then funding commitments have been issued on a rolling basis. And you'll see the next slide says that funding was, as of July 1st, $190 million had been committed for these applications. That is actually out of date now. The latest is that this morning the Commission announced that another funding commitment of $10 million, which means that all $200 million from the appropriation has been committed at this point. The Commission stopped accepting applications for the COVID-19 telehealth program last month because we anticipated that all funding would be committed for it now. But if you would like any additional information on the COVID-19 program or are interested in it, there is a link on our website on. And then the final program that I wanted to touch on is the Connected Care Pilot Program, which was a program that had been in the works since before the COVID-19 pandemic. It certainly is a program that we hope will address many of the issues that have arisen with rural healthcare and urban healthcare providers and patients since then. So the same day the Commission established the COVID-19 telehealth program, it also established this Connected Care Pilot Program, which is a 3-year, up to $100 million pilot that will examine whether universal service funding can support the trend toward connected care services and possibly defray eligible healthcare providers' costs of providing connected care services. This particular program places emphasis on projects that serve low-income Americans and veterans, and it will be open to rural and non-rural healthcare providers. On the next slide, you'll see that it will fund connectivity service, network equipment necessary to make connectivity service function, and information services. These services can be for the healthcare provider or participating patient. We haven't started accepting applications for this program yet, and we don't have a date yet for when we will begin to accept applications, but there is additional information available on the FCC's website at the link below. So again, thank you to our organizers for giving me the opportunity to share some information about these 3 programs, and back to you, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That was a great overview, some really good information. I'm sure there will be follow-up on that. Our next speaker is also another Brian, but Brian Smith, who is a field representative from the USDA, who covers the New Mexico, Colorado, and Arizona territories. Brian?
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Today I'm going to talk to you about 3 of our programs. We actually have 5 different programs. One is for incumbent local exchange carriers, or your regular phone companies. And then we also have another one which is going through a regulatory rewrite. And we're hoping that'll be finished sometime in the next fiscal year and will be funded. The first one I wanted to touch on was our distance learning and telemedicine grant program. This is basically a program that improves access for those in remote areas, whether that be through medical, such as maybe you can get a doctor in an urban area to take care of patients in a rural area through telemedicine, or same with teachers. You might be able to not offer a certain class because you don't have a teacher, and such as dual enrollment, and this program is great for that. And you're able to offer those classes from an urban area and bring them to rural students. On the next slide, please. The distance learning and telemedicine program is scored off of 3 categories, well, 4 categories. There's 3 objective and 1 subjective. The first one is rurality. We do a calculation based on basically census data to get us some information on how rural you are. That turns out to a scoring point up to 40 points. We use SAPE scores for economic need. And then we have special consideration points, and that can change from year to year. Usually it incorporates STEM somehow for distance learning. This year we were able to add opportunity zones. And in the past, in some years, we've seen tribal consideration points. And then those are the objective scores, but we also have a subjective score, which is the service needs and benefits. And that one is where you can write a narrative and make the case using data that possibly is not showing in the economic need or the rurality, such as, you know, when you take economic need, it'll come from the county data, and you might have a county that has a wealthy portion skewing the data, and maybe you're able to get some more localized information. The next one, please. The distance learning and telemedicine program did come out with a new provision a couple years ago, and that's where you can use up to 20% of the funds to install broadband facilities. Basically, the maximum is 20%, so you can't do the whole grant for connectivity, but you can use 20% of it for connectivity, and it must be used for providing that distance learning or telemedicine services. And one of the things that's been a little bit of a challenge with this is that the awardee must own those broadband assets in order for it to be approved. So it can't just be giving money to a provider to create this connectivity. The applicant must be the owner of it. Generally, the way we do this is you can ask us for assistance up to 15 days prior to the final application due date. Our current one right now is closing out next Monday, so it's kind of late to be applying for applications, but we did have 2 rounds this year. The second one was CARES Act funding, and the first one closed several months ago, and that one was our general request. And this year we've had more funding than we ever had, and hopefully next year that will continue as well. To be an eligible applicant for this program, here's the type of applicants that are eligible. As you can see, it kind of has a wide variety for eligibility. And so if you are one of those, you are more than welcome to apply. Here are some of the categories of eligible grant purposes. You can acquire equipment through lease or purchase. We'll cover 3 years of the lease if that's what it is, because the grant actually lasts for 3 years. The broadband facilities, as long as they don't exceed 20% of the grant amount. And it will pay for instructional programming as long as it does not, or it is classified as a capital asset. And you can also use it for technical assistance and instruction for using eligible equipment. However, those cannot be internal costs. We won't pay you to teach your own people to use the equipment. Here's some of the ineligible purposes. So we don't want to see this money go to things that are not used for medical or, pay for medical or educational equipment that doesn't have a telemedicine aspect. So this isn't for electronic medical records or a new machine that's going to take, x-rays or radiology. We do not pay salaries or administrative expenses. Anything classified under those categories would not be eligible. We don't pay for your application preparation costs, and nor do we pay for purchase of land, buildings, or other alteration of buildings unless it's related to things such as inside wiring for the purposes of the connectivity. Here are some examples of eligible equipment: computer hardware and software, obviously audio and video equipment, some of the network components, inside wiring like I was saying earlier, interactive audio and video equipment, and broadband facilities, you need to demonstrate for whatever you're purchasing that 50% or more of the use of every item in the grant is going to be used for distance learning and telemedicine. This can be a little tricky because a lot of people want to, say, provide Chromebooks to students, and that can be a little tricky if you can't prove that it's going to be used for more than 50% for distance learning. And by distance learning, you have to remember that we're looking for a real-time interactive component to it, not just accessing Google Docs or Google Classroom. You really need to make sure that there's some kind of actual real-time synchronous learning program to your application. We do expect you to provide a matching contribution, which is 15%. There's some special provisions that do not apply to New Mexico. When it comes to matching contributions, we do have in-kind available. However, in-kind must be for the items, must be for hard items that are listed in the eligible equipment. Therefore, you can't just say, I'm going to donate this person's time to it. It actually, the way it works out is it's pretty much the same as anything that would be cash that you would be buying through the grant purposes. So you do got to be careful on that. Like it says there, matching funds can be cash or equipment, and they must be purpose that would otherwise be eligible for grant funding. And again, no salaries or administrative expenses. Vendor discounts or supplied equipment is not an eligible in-kind contribution. And again, we only want new equipment to be used in this and not depreciated equipment. Some of the scoring, this will go a little bit more into that again. So applications are scored, and every year it's published in the NOFA that the funding op or FOA, how that's going to be determined. I kind of went over it. It really doesn't change that often, but there can be different facets to it. So you do want to take a good look at the funding opportunity announcement. You can follow this link if you want to learn more about our programs on this distance learning and telemedicine. The next program I'm going to talk to you about is the community, this is a new name for it, Community-Oriented Connectivity Broadband Grant Program, or as previously referred to as Community Connect. This one has also gone through a regulatory rewrite, and we anticipate that it will hopefully in the fall again be available for funded as that, as well as the other one that I mentioned at my opening. Will hopefully as well have funds in this next year now that it's been rewritten. This is basically a competitive grant program, and we score them via a point system. The NOFA or NOSA or FOA, depending upon how it's done, usually comes out in the spring or late fall. And it is generally, it can change every year as far as what the broadband service is defined as. However, for a couple years now, it's been unserved, has been considered less than 10-1, so 10 down, 1 up. And when you're done, if you do receive a grant, we expect you to provide the FCC 25 down and 3 up service. For the definition, basically broadband service means any terrestrial technology that has the capacity to provide transmission facilities that enables those subscribing to the service to originate and receive high quality voice data, graphics, and video at a minimum rate of 10 megabits down and 1 megabits up for both fixed and mobile service. And the broadband grant speed, we want it to be the 25 down and the 3 up. This grant, the minimum is 100,000 and the maximum is 3 million. Here's some of the eligible applicants: an Indian tribe, a state or local unit of government, an incorporated organization, a cooperative, private corporation or LLC, and we do not make grants to individuals or partnerships. Obviously, you must have the legal capacity and authority to apply for this funding, and you must be able to own and operate a broadband system. This is geared towards those who either are an ISP or are prepared to become an internet service provider through this program. Basically, with this program, what you're going to do, it says to be eligible for Community Connect grant, the project must do these following things. Basically, you're going to draw a service area, or PFSA, which is proposed funded service area, that does not have 10.1. So for that to qualify, the way we do things is we understand that maybe some of the reporting data that's available out there may not be correct, and you can apply even if it's reported that someone is serving that area with 10.1, and then we go out and make a determination. I always like to tell the story of I grew up in Alaska, and for a while there I took Alaska back as an area after someone retired, and I had to go up and do one of these in a rural area of Alaska. And I flew into Fairbanks and I drove down and I met someone at a boat launch on the side of a river, which would barely consider a boat launch. And then we got on their boat and we drove to their island so that we could go and do the service checks. So we take it pretty seriously. One of the things that is tough with this is if you have LTE in the area, it can affect your 10.1. We include LTE in this program. So if cell service gets you above 10.1, it can throw your application out for this. So do be careful when you apply and make sure that the PFSA is truly unserved. Again, you have to offer that broadband grant speed 25.3 to all residents and businesses within that PFSA. For critical community facilities such as fire stations and police, you have to be able to offer free service to them. They don't have to take it, but you have to be able to offer to them for at least 2 years. It lists all the different critical community facilities there as well. You have to provide a community center within the PFSA with 2 computer access points and wireless access at the broadband grant speed, free of all charge to users for at least 2 years. And it has to be open and accessible to residents during normal working hours and on weekends. A lot of the times we see that take place in the library, and libraries usually is where they put those if it's a small community. Again, proposed funded service area. What it means for this is a contiguous geographic area within an eligible rural area, which the applicant proposes to provide service at the broadband grant speed. You draw your proposed funded service area when you apply for this. So you want to make sure, again, that your mapping does not overlap into areas where service is being provided already. For the definitions of this program, a rural area is an area with a population less than 20,000 and is not adjacent to an urban or contiguous to an urban area that has a population of greater than 50,000. Like I said earlier, broadband speeds 10.1 or greater cannot exist in any portion of the publicly funded service area. You can use the resource on the FCC data. I think that website is still active, and you can do a search to see what's available in your area. But again, I will make it clear that we do check and we understand that some of the reported speeds are not the actual speeds for certain areas. So we do take that into consideration. Basically, this is to build a network and become an ISP. It's eligible grant purpose is the construction, acquisition, or leasing of facilities used to deploy service at the broadband grant speed to all residents and businesses in the PFSA that you have drawn. If you have any buildings being constructed, such as a central office or something, you would have to make sure that they reside on property wholly owned by the recipient of the award. And we only cover leasing costs through the period included in the award documents. Again, you can improve or expand construction or acquisition of a community center. That can be paid for through this. We had the Pueblo of Laguna do this several years ago, and they were able to, they actually did 6 grants, and they were able to create community centers using old trailers from the FEMA. They bought them at a really discounted price, and they used those to house the community centers and place them in different areas where their grants were at. Again, at least 2 computers up to 10 with wireless, with access points, and you must provide community facilities with 2 years of free service, critical community facilities, sorry. The funds cannot be used to duplicate any existing broadband service provided by other entities, but also, again, we would be checking to make sure that you're not overlapping. Operating expenses that are just general costs are not going to be paid for us. We expect this to be a business that can operate on its own. Matching contributions, there must be a cash match of at least 15%. It cannot include any financial assistance from a federal source. You can't stack federal funds. And you must demonstrate at the time of closing that you have that money available, and it must be used or must be available in the form of cash. Scoring is up to 100 points. And this can also change, when they redo these. So there can be different portions to the scoring. But basically the challenge of the PFSA can be up to 50 points. Community participation, usually if you're researching something like this, that's not an issue to get it. But the more participation, surveys, letters of support, those types of things are great for that. And then management experience, you can get up to 10 points for that. In making the final selection among and between applications with comparable rankings, the administrator can take into consideration characteristics of the PFSA. So there is some discretion. If the scoring is the same, you can say, this one appears to need it more than that one, and go ahead and do that. There is a provision in there that can be used for substantially underserved trust areas, which is generally tribal areas. And if communities are losing a lot to outmigration, or if there's a lot of community members with disabilities served within the PFSA, these are things that the administrator can take into consideration with an application. Obviously, like I said, it's been a while since this program was funded because of the rewrite. So this is some old information. We're hoping it'll be funded next year. The final program I wanted to talk to you about today is Reconnect. We have had 2 rounds now on Reconnect. The first one, those have all been announced and funded. What came out of the 2018 Consolidated Appropriations Act, and there was $600 million. And it was to assist communities, much like the Community Connect that had did not have 10-1 service available to them. In 2019, we received another $550 million in funding for that program, and that round closed in the spring, and we had 1.2 billion in applications for that program. So it's been pretty competitive. Last year, as the senator was saying, we had 23 million funded in New Mexico for this from Reconnect in the first round, and then hopefully we'll see some more here in round 2, which is in the works right now. Basically, here's who can apply for this program. Gives state and local governments, tribal entities, nonprofits, for-profits, pretty much the whole gamut of everyone here. In New Mexico, we had Pueblo of Acoma, so they fell under the Indian tribe, and they received an award to provide fiber on the Pueblo. We also had Plateau Communications, or ENMR, and they had a very large area that they were adding last mile service to throughout New Mexico. And then we also had Penasco Valley Telephone, who received an award to also upgrade service in their areas. So we had a tribal entity, then we had 2 cooperatives as well. Here's some of the application eligibility factors. We want to see that your project's going to be built out in a timely manner. It's 5 years according to the construction procedures. We want to see that you're going to be able to maintain. It's going to be feasible and sustainable, and it's going to be fully funded. Here's the different tiers that we've used for the past 2 rounds. I expect these to be similar. And going forward, you must provide 25/3 service when the project is complete. We can do a loan at 2% interest rate. We can do a 50-50 loan and grant at the U.S. Treasury rate of up to $50 million, again, for that one as well. And we can do a grant for up to $25 million. The grant must include a 25% cash match. So we call it a 100% grant, but it's 100% grant funds to 75% of the project. The 50-50, if you do the loan and grant, you can go with no match. And then obviously with the loan, you can go with no match as well. These are competitively scored. And in the past couple rounds, we had 200 million in each of the different categories for funding. Here is what we expect you to do. The build out speed for a loan, we expect it to be 25/3. There is, if you provide higher speeds, you can get more points, depending upon what those are, under the combo and under the grant. And maximum award is 50 million under combo and 25 million under the grant. And again, these are competitively scored. That loan program has a different kind of tier to it. If you qualify, it's not so much competitively scored as much as completeness of your applications and feasibility of the project. For your proposed service areas, this program is different than Community Connect in that you can have multiple service areas in your project. You don't just have to have one contiguous service area. You can also draw donut holes. Say it's just an outlying area of a community that you want to serve. You know that the local provider provides something, in the main areas of town where it's most profitable. You could draw out that area and offer service to the surrounding areas using a donut hole method. 90% of the households, when we come out and check, we're going to do a desktop research review, and then we're going to do a field review, and we're going to go out there and see what kind of infrastructure is in the area, talk to people in the community. We want to see for all 3 that 90% of the area is unserved or underserved, meaning that they have service of less than 10.1. So insufficient service, less than 10.1 for 90% of the community to qualify. Basically, costs are going to be the things you need to build a network. The construction or improvement of facilities that are already there, to provide the broadband service. We can pay pre-application expenses that are accrued after the award announcement, and we want to make sure that those do not exceed 5% of the total award amount. The services must be terrestrial-based facilities. And so what they're saying was for satellite broadband, so if there was something that was terrestrial-based related to satellite, it could be, but we're not going to cover satellite-based services under this program. It could be wireless, stuff like that. The cost must be reasonable, allocable, and necessary. In other words, they're going to be reviewed by engineers and financial staff to make sure. And applications that propose to use any portion of the award or matching funds for any ineligible costs may be rejected. For 100% loans, the acquisition of an existing system may be included. So take a look at the application guide for that. Here is some of the things that we offer extra points for, that you can get points to, your rurality. If it's more rural, we're going to give you more points. If you're serving farms or businesses, if you have a higher speed, if you have healthcare centers, if it's in a tribal area, those are the kind of things that you can get more points for your application for. Here is that breakdown for that. The rurality of the proposed service area, you can get up to 25 points. You can get a point for every farm served for an up to 20. If you offer 100 up, 100 down service, you can get up to 20 points. 1 point for each business, 5 points for opportunity zones, and you can see some of the other items listed there. These also can change. And once we have the final regulation, because this was a pilot program for the first 2 rounds, now they're going into a final regulation. These items should all be more defined in the next round. Next slide, please. You have to submit your application online only. We do not take paper applications. And you must be registered in SAM and have a DUNS number in order to submit an application. We offer workshops as available. It's kind of a little bit different now. We've been trying to do these online some, but myself, I'm available to help out any community that needs it. And we'll try and just keep offering our things that we have. We have the website, which is reconnect.usda.gov. And one great thing about Rural Utility Service is that we have extremely good application guides. You can go to the website and you can see past webinars. You can see training. You can see the application guide, which, like I said, is extremely comprehensive. We have staff dedicated to answering your questions. And we also have guides that go over construction procedures and all the stuff that you're going to have in dealing with us if you do get funded. Again, reconnect.usda.gov for questions on this.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my information. So brian.smith1@usda.gov. Email me your questions. I'm more than happy to do my best to help you out. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Brian. That was a tremendous presentation, a lot of very valuable detail. The USDA has done a great job in putting the Reconnect program together, and they do an excellent job supporting it out in the field too. Brian, thank you very much. You've been a great resource, and we appreciate your support. So our next presentation is also with the USDA with Ray Melton, who is representing the Rural Business Development Grant Program. Ray?
Good morning, thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Senator Udall and Representative Torres Small for allowing us to present these programs to you this morning. On the first slide, what we have here is a basic description of two types of grants. This is the Rural Business Development Grant Program. And there are two opportunities under this grant program. One is the business opportunity type grant. The second is a business enterprise type grant. And these serve projects that are in rural areas. I'd like to go to the next slide, please. The eligible applicants for this program are public bodies or government entities, Native American tribes, and nonprofit entities. These entities must all serve rural areas, and the definition of rural under this program is 50,000 or less in total population. Next slide, please. Eligible purposes for the program under the enterprise type funding. Specifically, what stands out here that most of you will be interested in is feasibility studies and business plans for broadband. We can go in and assist you with this type of project and get funding for you. It typically, the grant program comes out every April, and we usually have about a 30-day window to obtain applications. And then once the applications are secured and we've received the funding for those applications and completed the scoring on them, you typically have 1 year to complete your feasibility study and business plans and on any of the Rural Business Development Grant Program projects. So basically that's what you have is 1 year to complete the project. We also, in addition to doing the feasibility studies and business plans, we do training and technical assistance, such as project planning, business training, marketing research, etc. We also do some acquisition and development of land and easements, right-of-ways, construction, equipment, things of that nature. However, it is a grant program that, based on the scoring criteria, generally grant projects that are 999,000 or less receive the highest scoring. So there's really not a whole lot of opportunity to do a whole lot of land acquisition under this grant program. We also do rural business incubators, and then we also have rural transportation improvement. Under the opportunity grant funding, we have a community economic development aspect to that grant program. In that program, we also do feasibility studies and business plans. We also go through and do leadership and entrepreneur training. We do rural business incubators, and we also do long-term business strategic planning. So between both of these programs, they cover a wide array of what potential projects that you might have out there. However, you do have to fall within the eligibility criteria, and you do have to fall within the rural definition of being under 50,000 or less. These are for rural areas, and that's it specifically. An example of a project is we did fund a feasibility study for Sierra County last year. They're wrapping up their feasibility study and project right now. So that gives you a basic idea of what we can do and where you can actually go with this type of funding for your projects that you may be interested in. I'd like to go to the final slide, please. Here is the contact information. I have loan specialists located in Roswell, Aztec, Las Vegas, and Las Cruces. Please feel free to reach out to these people. They will gladly assist you with your project. We like to start the projects as soon as possible. That way it allows us time to go through and review your application to make sure that we haven't missed anything on it and gives you the best opportunity to receive funding. Again, and it's hard to say because I really don't have a crystal ball on when the national office decides to roll out our funding, but typically between March and May is when this grant opportunity will come up and we'll be needing to receive the applications in. So we really like to start working with people midsummer, early fall, and start getting to know your project and assisting you with reviews whenever we can do that type of work. Please feel free to reach out to any of these folks. I am located in the Roswell office. If you need to contact me, you can utilize that same number, or if you reach Kathy Barrett, the coordinator of the program, she can get you in touch with me, and she's very well versed in the program and can assist you if you need that as well. That basically covers what I needed to get across to folks. Please let us know if we can assist you.
Thank you, Ray. That was a great overview, very important information. Appreciate it. We will now switch over to our State Chief Geospatial Information Officer, our GIO, Gar Clark. He's going to give us a quick briefing on the New Mexico Broadband Program mapping resources. Gar?
Okay, well, thank you, Kendra, and also Senator Udall's team. Oh wait, I'm going to uncover, by the way. Everybody get ready, dodge the droplets. Anyhow, I am work very closely with Kendra, the Office of Broadband, and the Office of Geospatial Technologies within the Department of Information Technology. And we have been through a number of years, have been developing a broadband map, as well as a broadband page and associated reports. That being said, our mapping and the data that we have supports much of what a lot of these smart people with cash in their back pocket and a lot of knowledge sets up criteria that you can utilize the data and the maps that we have in order to develop an area of that could be your service area. So some of the things that we do have in the first slide here is mapping support. First of all, what we have, which really isn't a part of our discussion today, but we are collecting Wi-Fi parking lot hotspots throughout the state. There's pop-ups associated with that, and throughout communities, it's a big story behind how we're collecting the data and how we've got a disaster recovery team from out of state to help us. But also too, if anybody needs that kind of support, these are the areas that you can go and sit in a parking lot and get at least some access. Some of the things that we have, we try to update and maintain in our map is availability by technology type. We get this data, of course, from FCC 477, but more importantly, we have an ISP folks throughout our state. We have maybe 80 to 90 of them easily. And if we talk about the wireless, and we get data directly from them. So it's a combination of FCC plus data directly from the providers. So these, it's availability by technology type, fiber cable, DSL, fixed mobile, etc. And when you click on that, it'll tell you what providers are providing what service type or technology type. CASA, Community Anchor Site Assessment. These are public facilities. If you notice in eligibility that the more public facilities that you hook up, like health, libraries, schools, things of that sort, we have all of those mapped, and we're updating and maintaining that through time. So that could be very helpful in defining your service area that or grant area that you want to provide. Another thing is structure. We have address points throughout the entire state. I would say they're about 95% complete. They're updated and maintained every month through our New Mexico 911 program. Sad to say that we have not differentiated between residential and also businesses, and we're going to get to that point. But at least you know that if there's a take rate out there, that you can count the number of potential customers, be it residential or not. Again, also telecom resources. We have towers. There must be about 12,000 of them that we brought from all types of sources, and we've normalized that data as best we can, and that's available to you too. You click on that. There's a lot of data behind all of this, but we only inform on, so it doesn't get too complicated, but at least you know who owns that tower and can contact them in order to see about developing a collaborative. Boundaries, county and tribal. and you can see some of the information that we have there and what it looks like. There are tools too that are very helpful. There's a map maker there that you can create a JPEG, a PDF, and incorporate that into your application package if you want. And as a result, you can enhance that as well as a map measure and a speed tester. Our speed tester, by the way, is located here in New Mexico, so you're not bouncing all over the universe. And so as a result, you can utilize that and do some comparative shopping as a result. Next, please. And so what really is probably more important, not more important, but adds value is we also have mapped all the funding areas. So all the awarded Connect America funds, CAF 1, 2, and the USDA Reconnect are all mapped there. So you can see what areas are, let's say, taken out of the game, and by who, and by how much as well. So those are all mapped. RDOF Auction 904 eligible areas are also mapped there too. So you can have a look at that if you're into the RDOF world. And then also challenged areas that there are 4 providers in the state of New Mexico who are challenging that those eligible areas should be ineligible. And so that gives you an idea where those are. We are going to get also the PRC, Public Regulatory Commission, their awarded areas on there as well. So that will be helpful too, because those areas would be under construction and probably pulled out of the game. Administrative boundaries. What we've done there is we've added value and included the economic opportunity zone. As you notice, Brian Smith mentioned that the EOCs will give you more points. And then also too, the rural census places, we also have put populations of 20,000 or less considered rural. And so that could be helpful to any application or grant application proposal that you put together. Now, all of these data too are available to you. So if you have your own analysis zone, I mean, not analysis, but you have your own geospatial or, and we do share this data with ISPs, just contact me and we can get you the information. Another thing that adds points on the Reconnect is the fact that we do, for the state of New Mexico, we do have a now, brand new, off the press, a strategic plan, which focuses on rural assessment. And our other one was, 5 years to the month for the NOFA that came on out. So this is just in time, and that will add points as well. Another thing that adds points to Reconnect is that the fact that we do not have any legislation that where municipalities cannot build their own networks. Some states do have that. As a result, you get points that way. We are now looking, and Kendra is putting together some aspects to that, is to look really closely at speeding up right-of-way permitting within the state of New Mexico, at least with state agencies. So anyhow, I'll put in the chat box so you can click on the New Mexico map if you like. And that's all I got to offer. Thank you very much.
All right, Gar, thank you. That's a very good overview. So next up, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, U.S. Representative Xochitl Torres Small. She has been a major advocate for broadband resources for the state of New Mexico and is about to give us an update on current happenings in Washington, D.C. Representative, are you with us?
Yes, and thank you so much for allowing me to join you today and for all of the work that you've done to help put this together. It's a real honor to get to join you and to address one of the most urgent issues that's facing New Mexico, closing the digital divide. I'm so deeply grateful to be here with you and to get to join my mentor, Senator Tom Udall. His longtime advocacy for good, reliable internet in communities across New Mexico shows his dedication to making sure that all New Mexicans, no matter where they live, have access to the resources they need to build their own American dreams. And I'm just so grateful to get to learn from him for the hard work that he and his team have put together in putting this conference on and to get to be part of this as well. For millions of Americans, COVID-19 has made the need for high-quality, accessible internet services so much clearer as schools have to adapt to remote learning and healthcare providers are relying on telemedicine or any other way they can to reach the patients in need of care. They're doing this more and more each day, and I am so inspired by the way our communities and service providers have stepped up during this time to ensure as many students and healthcare providers and New Mexicans needing care or facing unemployment have access to that good, reliable internet in order to keep us all safe and continuing to learn and continuing to do what we can to rebuild our economy. As New Mexicans continue to work together to face COVID-19 head on, I was proud to vote for several relief packages aimed at easing the burden of local communities taking on these unexpected costs. The CARES Act included additional funding for some of the most important programs to deploy broadband funding, including many of those that were already discussed today, such as the Reconnect program and the Distance Learning and Telemedicine Grant program. It also created new programs like the COVID-19 Telehealth program to address the urgent challenges presented by the public health crisis. But as we've seen with COVID-19, this money only matters if it reaches the communities that need it most. And so thank you to all of those presenting today from USDA, FCC, and the state of New Mexico for your hard work in ensuring that this funding reaches our most rural communities. And thank you so much to the participants here who advocate every single day and are working hard now to best find the ways to provide essential services to our communities. In addition to COVID-19 focused funding to address COVID-19 internet activity, I also helped pass a comprehensive infrastructure bill that also takes on the need for rural broadband. COVID-19 showed that this is now a modern day necessity, but we know that this has always been the case when it comes to building new businesses and being able to make sure that rural New Mexico thrives in the same way that others can across our country. So last week, the House passed H.R. 2, the Moving Forward Act, and this key legislation invests critical funding to improve the country's crumbling infrastructure, and also included the Accessible Affordable Internet for All Act, which is legislation that I helped introduce last month with the House Rural Broadband Task Force. This package invests $100 billion in bold, new, innovative programs to bring high-speed internet services to rural areas across the country. Working with the task force over the past year, I've advocated for New Mexico's top priorities, including funding for service maps that reflect the real reality on the ground so that we're getting this infrastructure to the places that need it most. This bill will provide the FCC with funding they need to fulfill the mandate of the Broadband Data Act, prior legislation that was signed into law this March, and will produce more accurate, granular maps for the distribution of funding for broadband programs, new and old. This legislation will also invest $80 billion over 5 years to deploy high-speed internet across the country, focusing on our most underserved and hardest to reach communities. You know, when we electrified our nation in the 40s, we knew that it was going to take a big, bold investment. And just as people needed electricity to be able to compete on a worldwide market space and to make sure that rural communities were supported, these days, that's the case for good, reliable internet. It is a necessity in our current day. Lastly, the legislation included $5 billion for the rapid deployment of home internet service or mobile hotspots and other internet connected devices to enable students without internet at home to participate in remote learning. This is something we've absolutely used and seen be successful in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the coming months, I hope you use my office and all of the speakers today as resources as you continue working to connect communities across New Mexico. Thank you so much for everything that you do, and I hope that you have a wonderful and productive rest of your day.
For understanding and supporting the needs of broadband in New Mexico. We really need your support, and we just cannot thank you enough. We appreciate your time. Okay, so I guess we are moving on to our questions and answers session. And I I believe that most of these will probably require assistance from Brian Smith from the USDA. Brian, are you still with us? Hi, Brian.
I'm here.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start with the first question. Can CARES funding that schools receive be used as a match for the upcoming USDA distance learning and telemedicine grant?
Funding, as long as it's not federal funding, can be used. If it was received through a federal source, which it sounds like it might be, it would not be eligible for matching funds.
Okay. Moving on to the next one. Funding for rural communities that are underserved. I understand we don't qualify for Reconnect other funds because of a tiny part of our county that Comcast serves. I'm not sure if that one's phrased very clearly.
Yeah, it sounds like they just would need to draw their service area to not include that in order to be able to qualify. So it sounds like they might qualify, assuming that they, can draw that draw around the area that is already served.
Okay, good advice. Moving to the next one. Will there be any monies for computers and computer equipment, or is this strictly funding for broadband? And I think you probably kind of already answered that one, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you can use that stuff under, that's the purpose of the distance learning and telemedicine program. However, you want to make sure that you have a distance learning aspect to it that has the real-time synchronous communication between teachers and students, and you're not just providing or taking the place of what is normally done. You want to add some kind of new aspect to it and make sure that 50% of the equipment usage goes to that.
Okay, very good. All right, another one. When will this is a good question. When will the awards be announced for Reconnect 2, and will there be a Reconnect 3 announced?
I think they've already announced one award for Reconnect, and we're expecting more. They're announcing them out, they're going off of, they prioritized our field reviews related to how high the scoring was. And so we're starting with the highest scored ones that have finished review process so that they can announce those as they come out and finish the process. On the round 3, we don't have a set date for it, but we're hoping it'll be either around December or January. They're working on the final regulation since this is going from a pilot program to a regular program. They had to finalize some items in order before they can announce another round.
So I assume that information would be posted on the USDA website?
Definitely keep an eye on reconnect.usda.gov for additional information. Any changes that they have to the program are probably going to be minor. So if you are interested in the Reconnect program and you've looked at it before, you probably have realized that there's a lot to put into the application. So I would feel confident in saying use the existing information to start your application process. And then when when the funding opportunity announcement comes out, you would be able to make any minor changes that you need to.
Good advice. Okay. Another question. Is the deadline of July 13th for the RUS Telemedicine grant firm, or will it be extended?
Yeah, that definitely does not look like it's going to be extended. This is our second round this year, and it's very important to get that money out as soon as possible. So I don't anticipate any extensions at all, and would just look for funding next year if you cannot get the application done for this round.
And what would be the time frame for next year?
We don't get set dates, but probably January or February is usually when we see distance learning grants open back up, distance learning and telemedicine.
Okay, good to know. Okay, and then we have one more. Is funding available to electric cooperatives?
Electric cooperatives are eligible for the Reconnect program, and they may be eligible under our broadband loan and grant program, which is the one I did not speak about because it is going through regulatory changes and we don't know how the final is going to look. But that one is for ISPs and it allows for competition in areas. So you don't have to be completely unserved. You can just be providing service in an area with other ISPs. And so, electric co-ops, as well as telecommunications and ISPs are all eligible for Reconnect. And we have had several throughout the United States that they're in a unique position since they go to nearly pretty much every house anyways. So if they can string fiber along their existing equipment, it's sometimes easier for them to reach areas at a lower cost than it would be for someone else to provide new service. So yeah, definitely.
And so Brian, like what time frame do you expect to have more concrete information on the broadband loan and grant program?
I don't anticipate anything in this fiscal year. If assuming that we get a budget this year on time, then, maybe November and December, we'll start knowing a little bit more about what funding is in what buckets and how things are looking.
Okay, good to know. All right. Well, if anyone else has any more questions, please do follow up with us. This deck will be posted on the Do It website sometime today. And I think it's pretty thorough with contact information. And if you find that it's missing anything, feel free to contact me directly. I'm Kendra Karp at the Department of IT, Office of Broadband. In closing, I just want to thank Secretary Salazar, Senator Udall, his staff, especially Melanie Goodman and David Williams, for their effort in helping coordinate this webinar today. And throughout the years, they've been very supportive of our broadband initiatives. Of course, the representative, Torres Small, who recently spoke, and Brian, you and the rest of our presenters today. I think getting this information out as much as possible is really beneficial for everyone. Like I said, if you have any questions, please let me know. We'll make sure that this deck is posted. And I just want to thank everyone for attending. And we really look forward working with everyone in the community in addressing the rural broadband needs of New Mexico.